Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast. And the reason I'll let you have a little peek behind the curtains is because I'm always a week ahead in recordings. You will seldom get to hear if I run into any problems, if I have a run of cancelled guests, or I feel ill, or anything like that. So to you guys, you might be listening at home thinking, this guy never has a bad day, he's never got a cold, there's never anything wrong with him. But I wanted to check in with you all and let you know that it has been a bit of a struggle recently, because I know some of you will say, Neil, I don't want to hear this. It's a tech show. But I'm passionate about authentically sharing everything with you all, because we do talk with each other every single day. And I'm quite conscious that if I come on here talking to big names in tech every day and then promote my new book and go on holiday, you might think, man, Neil's life is unrealistically amazing. And that is kind of the problem with social media, isn't it? It's just a highlight reel and it's not real life. So my poor dad is only 68 years old. He's worked hard his entire life and he's been battling Parkinson's and dementia. And I've been watching these diseases take him bit by bit, and he's currently in hospital. He was rushed in last week and might have to enter respite care. So if you are listening to this and I cancelled a recording with you recently, I apologise. That was the reason why. And as for the rest of you, please don't take family time for granted. And if you can, please send over a few positive vibes to my old dad. I'd really appreciate that. But the show must go on. So let's get back to technology. I need to keep my mind busy. So today, rather than dwell on things, I want to explore how deep learning is making preventative cybersecurity a reality. And Deep Instinct is a fully autonomous system that can learn from all available raw data, as it's not limited by an expert's technological knowledge. And for those reasons, it provides the best unknown cyber threat prevention, detection and response, with the highest detection rates of unknown malware, while also generating a near zero false positive rate. So a company called Deep Instinct is input-agnostic and can protect any type of device, endpoint, mobile or server, and type of operating system or attacks with that low impact on performance that I was telling you about. So enough rambling from me. Buckle up and hold on tight, because I'm going to take your ears on a road trip to California, where my new friend from Deep Instinct is waiting to speak with us all. So let's speak with Stephen right now. So a massive warm welcome to the show, Steve. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Sure. My name is Steve Salinas. I'm the head of product marketing here at Deep Instinct, and my primary role is to make sure that the great technology and the great products that we are developing here at Deep Instinct, that the market, the cybersecurity professionals, those responsible for SOCs and all the way down to the security analysts, they understand what we do and how we can help them improve their security. So that's basically what my function is here. I've been in the security space in product management, product marketing roles. I was also in the field as a solution engineer, helping organizations understand different technologies for just over 13 years now.
Excellent. And there is a lot of excitement around deep learning, especially with cybersecurity at the moment. But I'd love to maybe take you back in time a little bit and just ask you, before deep learning was a thing, what were the biggest problems with preventative cybersecurity methods, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think prevention in cybersecurity has really gone through quite an evolution. If you think way back to the advent or the introduction of antivirus, and the way that we kind of look at it back then, when you were hardening or trying to secure your environment, the amount of threats and the type of threats that you had to protect against, for the most part, a lot of those were known. It was not that you weren't dealing with this massive threat landscape. So your traditional antivirus solutions, they operated off of signatures, basically kind of the fingerprints of different files. So if the file or an application had that fingerprint and was trying to either get installed on a machine or run on a machine, that antivirus could stop it easily, no problem, threat ended. Well, quickly we saw that attackers, there are a couple of things that occurred as well. The attack community, I guess you could call it started to get much bigger. And they quickly identified ways to get past those signature-based solutions. You make a few small changes to your malware, and to the antivirus, you're essentially invisible. So then that's when the attacks really started to gain steam. And then that's what you also saw. I think a lot of the different technology that we see today was developed in response to the fact that the prevention solutions that were in place were starting to become ineffective. So you started to see a lot of other specialty type security products enter the market. And today it's not uncommon for an enterprise to have 30, 40 plus products in their security stack. But kind of getting back to the evolution of prevention. So the signature based started to fail, and you started to get this defense in depth approach, which I think is still a great approach to take. But a few years ago, maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago, prevention kind of got another look, got its other time in the spotlight when you had what are commonly referred to as next-gen AV players coming to the market talking about machine learning and how you could use machine learning to identify threats. So that really did kind of shift the focus there, and you see now pretty much every security product in the market talks about how they use machine learning in some way, some form or fashion. But specifically for prevention, that machine learning approach was very effective, and it's still a really good approach. But again, the attackers, what are they always trying to do? They're always trying to figure out how to get past it, and they've started to see ways that they can get past kind of some of these next-gen players' machine learning prevention methods. So not that companies are completely abandoned those. A lot, the machine learning wave, I guess I could call it, for prevention did shift. It kind of shifted how organizations structured their security stack. But now, and we actually just did a survey sponsored it, I guess you'd say, with the Podium Institute, showing that a lot of organizations are really focused on detection and response today. But what we're doing at Deep Instinct, I kind of look at this as kind of the third wave of prevention technologies, where we're using deep learning to identify and prevent threats from impacting endpoints and servers and mobile devices. So it's really a continued evolution of prevention.
And we will have a lot of people listening all over the world from a variety of backgrounds. Yes, there'll be people in cybersecurity and in tech teams, but equally a lot of people outside of tech and business leaders attempting to learn a little bit more about the threats ahead and how they can look for solutions using technology, etc. So just to set the scene and get everyone on the same page, can you tell me a little bit more about how deep learning is a fully autonomous system that can learn from all available raw data and how it's not actually limited by an expert's technological knowledge like it used to be back in those old days?
Absolutely. So we'll talk about machine learning first, because I think that helps set the stage.
Yeah.
And then we'll kind of shift into how deep learning is a little bit different, or significantly different actually from a results standpoint. But essentially, if you think about machine learning, let's take a very basic example. If you're trying to, let's talk about images, since we might be talking to people that are not in cybersecurity. Machine learning to identify images is something that is commonly used. And essentially, let's take a very basic example we should all know. We all know what a dog looks like. I have a dog. Lots of people have dogs. So, tails, ears, nose, you can kind of identify a dog. And actually, when you were a kid, you just, without intending to learn what a dog is, you kind of identified what a dog is. But essentially, if you're going to try to train a machine learning model to identify dogs in pictures, you would identify the features of that picture. So again, we are kind of all dog experts. So we could say, all right, dogs have ears and noses and this and that. And we give those features to the machine learning model. And then we start sending in a bunch of pictures. And it starts to identify, okay, that's a dog, that's a dog, that's a dog. But then we send in a bunch of cat pictures, I should say. So if you think about a cat, what does a cat have? Ears, nose, tail. All right, hold on a minute. The machine learning model is going to say, all right, this cat is a dog, this cat is a dog, and whoa, okay, so obviously that's not true. So then you have to start to get very specific, and then it becomes very difficult. It becomes very difficult to train that machine learning model on the differences between a cat and a dog, because now you have to think about the characteristics and get very precise. And again, the complexity starts to increase. So machine learning does a good job in identifying certain things. Now, if we switch over to deep learning, it's a different approach. Instead of identifying the features for the deep learning model, what we do is we send in a bunch of, again, let's go back to the pictures example. We say, here are millions of pictures of dogs. And the only thing that we provide to the deep learning model is the picture and the label that it's a dog. And then the model itself, we look at the results. So we have not identified any specific features of the dogs. We haven't told it how far apart the eyes are, anything at all. But based on the way that, so it's looking at every possible feature of this picture. And then over time, as it trains, it's going to get extremely good at identifying a dog compared to a cat, compared to a squirrel, compared to a goat, whatever it might be, because we've given it kind of this raw data to learn from. So that's kind of the differences, where you don't have to be an expert to train a deep learning model. Obviously, you have to be a data scientist, and we have lots of those in our organization to build that model. But the actual training of it is not based on any sort of features that an expert has identified. So that's what makes it really great and a very applicable approach for cybersecurity, because it eliminates the potential. And again, there's the potential with the machine learning model, since it's working off of, let's flip back to cybersecurity. It's working off of specific characteristics or features of, let's say, a file, to identify it if it's malicious or not. Well, the attackers, if they can somehow understand what those features are, they can either obfuscate them, they cannot use them to trick, quote unquote, trick that machine learning model into thinking their malware is actually totally fine and okay to run. With deep learning, we send in the entire files, or whatever that the file that we wanted to train on, and again, it's only labeled as either malicious or okay or benign. So the model itself is identifying the features. So we don't even know what the features are specifically. So if it's kind of this approach where, from an attacker's point of view, it would be extremely difficult for them to identify how this deep learning model has identified their piece of malware as malicious. So I think that's where we talk about a lot about deep learning providing a resilient prevention, because it has that ability. It's not relying on that expert to tell it the features of a file. It's taking the entire contents and it's making that decision all by itself.
And how important is the role of deep learning in making preventative cybersecurity an actual reality? Because I know it's been a destination that everyone's been chasing for so long, but is deep learning almost like that missing jigsaw piece of the puzzle?
Well, I do think it's extremely important, because it is a continued evolution. And unfortunately, I think from a cybersecurity point of view, it's going to be really difficult, if not impossible, probably impossible, for any sort of prevention capability to be 100%, to deliver 100% of prevention all the time. Now, certainly we have customers, we work with a lot of different organizations, and they're seeing dramatic increases in their ability to prevent attacks. And that's what deep learning does deliver. It's that resilient prevention, but nothing's ever going to be 100%. But I will say, and I've been at different organizations and working with different technologies that were kind of old style. I'd call it the legacy approach to prevention. And I was at a machine learning, a vendor that did a machine learning approach to prevention. And based on what I see, what our product does, and the use of deep learning itself, I think it's the natural evolution. I think it will become the standard approach to prevention, because again, it doesn't rely on experts. And one of the things that we have a shortage of, certainly, are security experts. You probably have talked about it yourself, about the cybersecurity skills shortage, and this gap continues to exist, if not even get bigger. So this approach that's using mathematics, that does not require the expertise, it gives security teams the best chance to prevent attack from impacting their environment. So I think that's really what we're going to start to see. I think if you're using anything other than a deep learning approach, you're probably going to be you are going to be running at more risk than an organization that's adopt a prevention approach that's built around deep learning.
And what about you guys at Deep Instinct? How are you guys using it to change cybersecurity by harnessing the power of deep learning and preventing those threats in almost zero time?
Yeah, so that's what's really interesting, and why I joined Deep Instinct is when I was looking at the technology. Because personally, I love technology. I always like to kind of be at the cutting edge and keep myself abreast on what's available in the market. And the endpoint or the prevention, and obviously we're not an endpoint security company. We deliver security for endpoints and servers and mobile devices and a number of different virtual environments and operating systems and the like. But when you look at prevention, a lot of times this prevention is going to occur at the endpoint because that's where the employees are and that's where the attackers are attacking. So what Deep Instinct has done, they saw the founders and the researchers looked at what was available in the market and said, you know what, it continues to fail even with this machine learning. And understanding the abilities of deep learning and how it can take this really, really hard problem and make that decision and get to a point where we call the model itself has this inference ability in milliseconds to make this determination on any sort of file or a process that might be trying to run on an endpoint. It's a game changer. And the reason, and also because one of the other kind of limitations or challenges with kind of, if we go back to the machine learning for just a moment, in order for that machine learning model to make a decision if a file is malicious or benign, again, it has to be given features of the file. So you have to have experts, like if you wanted to support identifying Office documents or PDF documents or any sort of specific file, someone had to go in there and research it, identify the features, and build a specific model around that specific feature set. With deep learning, the way that our deep learning model works, we need to have a set of files of that specific file type to train on, but we're not identifying any features. So our model and the way that we're using it, our deep learning model, we call our DBrain, it supports PDF documents, Office documents from a pre-execution standpoint. So this is really important, I think, to understand the differences, because certainly a lot of security vendors in the market, they do provide the ability to identify, let's say, a malicious PDF file. But what they're using is the behavior. So once the malicious action starts to occur on the endpoint, they might have some capabilities to identify, oh, this is malicious, and they might try to stop it. Well, depending on how long that takes, the attackers may have done some pretty bad things in that environment already. But our use of deep learning is in what we call zero time or like pre-execution, essentially. So that, like, so for the example, obviously still one of the most common attack vectors today are phishing emails. And so just as an example, when an employee, let's say they get a phishing email that has a malicious attachment, if that endpoint has deep learning installed, our deep learning agent, as soon as the email hits the inbox, we are going to scan it and identify that as malicious, and we're going to prevent it from running. So it completely eliminates the risk that the attacker is going to have a window, whether it be a second, 1 minute, 5 minutes, an hour, to carry on a bunch of nefarious things in the environment. We're stopping it right away. So I think that's really where a lot of the differences come from, our deep learning approach. And just a little bit more about that. We actually are using NVIDIA GPUs to train our model in the cloud. It's a massive model with a massive repository of training data. Once we get the model to a point where it's generating really good efficacy, we compress it down and we make it small enough to where it can be deployed on endpoints and servers and mobile devices. And it's very quiet. It just sits there waiting for new files to be added to the machine or files to move around the machine. It's going to scan them in that zero time and make that decision, whether it's malicious or benign.
And two things that really stand out for me and look incredibly exciting about deep learning is one, that it's input agnostic, and two, the low impact on performance. But for any business leaders listening, can you just tell me a little bit more about exactly what that means for enterprises?
Yeah, and I think it's really powerful. I'm glad you brought that up, because one of the problems, and it's interesting if you think about the evolution again. Let's think about legacy AV solutions. We've all experienced them, to where back in the day, in the old days, whenever your machine had to undertake one of these virus scans, boy, the CPU usage would go through the roof, and the machine might become unusable for a number of minutes. And really, if you look at that, let's say that I have an organization with thousands of machines. What is this also doing? This is taxing my machine. So over time, you're actually going to have to replace these machines faster if you're using a solution that is requiring and spinning the disk and all of this stuff on a very regular basis. It does wear and tear on the machines. So that's kind of the old approach. So with what's really nice about our utilization of deep learning and what it allows us to do, as I mentioned just previously, we compress this very large model that was in the cloud that has this uncanny ability to identify threats. And it's very small. It's very small. It sits on the endpoint or the server or the mobile device. And it sits there quietly. So there's like literally no CPU usage. Now, let's say that I go and I start to download a file. It's going to identify the file as being time. It's going to scan the file. Right? And as it identifies it to be malicious, it'll flag it as malicious, and based on how the product's been set up, it'll either automatically quarantine it or block it. There's a very small configuration that the organization can do to basically just tell the model or tell our solution what does it want us to do when we identify something as malicious. So so you're not going to get that constant wear and tear on your endpoints, and over time you're going to see, you know what, maybe I don't need to replace these as often as I used to. But as far as the input agnostic portion, which I kind of referenced a moment ago as well, some of the other approaches to prevention require, obviously, if you're using signatures, you need the actual signatures, and you have to download all these constant updates, and there's a lot of maintenance, a lot of headaches associated with that. Machine learning models have to be trained specifically on the file with the features, which I talked about a moment ago as well. Our approach, we essentially support more. Our deep learning model supports more file types than anything else out in the market. So one of the things we just recently released was support for or identified attackers were using jar files to spread their to take on their attacks, and machine learning models do not support jar files. There's no other solution in the marketplace that does. Well, we do. So we're able to identify the jar file itself was malicious, and we quarantined it. And there was embedded inside the jar file were a bunch of malicious files, and it was going to allow the attacker to get access to this environment to carry on God knows what. But this is where it's really important. Because it's input agnostic, it has that ability to identify threats on a number of different file types. And if there's one that maybe an organization is using that is a little bit uncommon, the only thing we need to have is a training data set. That is it. We train it on that data set, and guess what? Now the model supports that as well. So it makes it extremely flexible and extensible.
And I'm curious, do you have any other examples that you can share that would possibly show how the deep learning brain handles most of the security and in almost zero time, like I said a few moments ago, in milliseconds, and while also providing administrators with that user-friendly management console? Because there's been so many elements of cybersecurity in the past that do little bits of those, but not all of them together.
Yeah, so the really nice thing about our approach, and I haven't really mentioned too much, but I've kind of referenced it, is one of the things that our customers really like is that when we develop and so the deep learning brain itself, we are training it on our side. We have teams that are working on new versions of this constantly, but we only make updates to it twice a year, and those updates are made available to our customers, and they can push that out to their endpoint servers, mobile devices, so they're running on the latest version of it. But we have seen where customers, we had one specific example. This happened a while ago. I think it was in 2019, I think it was, where a new form, a new variant of a known ransomware family was identified in the wild. And this new variant was uploaded into VirusTotal. And if you're not familiar with VirusTotal, it's essentially a very large repository of suspicious files that anyone can upload. And it's got a bunch of vendors in there that have provided their engines. And you can kind of see which different engines are identifying as malicious or benign, whatever file has been uploaded. So this new variant got uploaded into VirusTotal. There are a lot of different engines in VirusTotal that did not identify it as malicious. Well, we actually had a customer that an attacker attempted to use this new variant of malware and to attack their environment. Well, we stopped it. Deep Instinct stopped it. So we looked at the customer's environment and identified that the brain that was being used there had actually been trained 19 months previously. So this customer had not even updated to the latest version of the brain, but it was still able to identify this malware that didn't exist when the brain was trained as being malicious. So I think that's where you see a lot of value, because just imagine if you're using a prevention solution today that requires daily or weekly updates. If you miss a couple of weeks, your exposure and your risk level incrementally grows. Even with some machine learning approaches, those let's say that for whatever reason your connectivity to the cloud was interrupted. Well, the prevention that you're going to be getting on those assets is going to be impacted. With our approach, with this ability to make that decision on the device without the reliance on the cloud, or without, again, all of the different things I talked about, how the deep learning approach works, it makes it extremely resilient, so that in this situation, like I explained, if you have devices that are intermittently connected to the internet or whatever have you, if you you install Deep Instinct on a laptop and then it goes into storage for a year, as soon as that comes out, it's protected from the minute it turns on. So I think that's really where you see a ton of benefit.
And before you came on the podcast today, I did read a blog over on Deep Instinct's website there, which found that in place of utilizing economies of scale and hoping for success through mass infections, ransomware, operators are now pivoting to become much more focused on targets that would suffer greatly during business downtime and therefore more likely to pay the ransom. But is that something you can expand on?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, I think ransomware has seen a lot of evolution, unfortunately, to where there was a ransomware that everyone was using, and then you had things that were, so like ransomware as a service where you could kind of create your own ransomware on the dark web. But the attackers are now seeing that, just spraying ransomware across kind of anonymous organizations isn't being that successful. But what they're doing more research on their targets, which is pretty frightening, I guess you could say, depending if you're one of these organizations that you get in their crosshairs. They're learning more about the organizations, and it's not that difficult. They can use social media to identify employees and kind of see what their employees are doing. And I mean, if the ransomware, think about where ransomware does, right? If it's able to run in an environment, essentially, the attacker owns all of your data. Now, in the past, there were a lot of different attackers when they were using ransomware. They would encrypt it. They didn't really care what the data was. They just say, okay, it's encrypted, pay me your ransom. But now they're looking to say, I have your data. I know what your data is, and I know you don't want this to get out. It's really nefarious, right? And then some organizations have no choice but to pay that ransomware. So it just emphasizes to us that we want to make sure that every organization has the best possible prevention approach to ransomware, because ransomware is, again, one of these attacks where, yes, you might be able to identify it after the fact, and certainly if you have backups, you could probably recover. But imagine that attacker not just having this data encrypted and not caring what it is, but they know what it is, and they know how damaging it could be if the data that they've actually encrypted gets out to the public. So that you want to do everything you possibly can to prevent that ransomware from ever having the opportunity to run in your environment.
And are there any other trends out there that you're noticing and the kind of things that your clients are talking about with you?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think when we actually sponsored, I think I may have referenced it a moment ago, but we sponsored a recent survey from the Poneman Institute. So in the report, 74% of respondents said that they don't focus on prevention because they find it to be too difficult. It takes too long, too many false positives, requires experts. There's a number of different reasons there. And you can grab this report from our website. The 70% felt like that if they had better prevention, it would have a positive impact on their environment and their ability to secure it. Also in the report, there was a reference to about 50% of the respondents of over 600 said they don't believe that they're spending their security budget effectively to really improve their prevention. So to me, from a security vendor perspective, really what they're asking is they want better prevention solutions. They want things that work better, that don't require expertise. And it really speaks to kind of a larger need from the security space in a whole is automation is really, really important today because there just aren't enough bodies, there aren't enough people that they can add to the security teams to keep pace with the threats that they're impacting their environments or trying to. So I think, automated solutions, better prevention solutions, these are sort of the things that we're seeing in the market. And we're getting a lot of questions about from our customers.
And there's so many big talking points from listening to you today. And so for anyone listening that would like to carry on that conversation, can you advise where they can find Deep Instinct online and even contact your team if they are left with any questions?
Sure. They can go to our website, which is deepinstinct.com. Lots of great resources on the website, especially if you want to learn more about deep learning. We have a whole section dedicated to anyone that's just curious about what is deep learning and goes into a little bit more detail on how we train our models and some of the things like that. Tons of resources there, lots of white papers. We have a kind of a beginner's deep learning ebook that's available there as well. You can reach out to us there to contact us for any more information. And if you have any questions for me, you can find me. My name is Steven Salinas on LinkedIn and Twitter. I'd be happy to talk to you more about how the benefits of deep learning and maybe how Deep Instinct can help you hit your security goals.
Excellent. Well, I'll add all those links to the blog post that will accompany this podcast episode, just so people can find Deep Instinct nice and easily on after listening to this episode. But there's so many big talking points, like I said a few moments ago. And what I love about it is how you're leveraging technology to make preventative cybersecurity not just another pipe dream, but a reality. And you're actually proving that is possible. So a big thank you, though, for coming on and sharing your story with me today.
Well, thanks for inviting me on. Appreciate it.
So the deep learning brain handles most of the security in almost zero time. And we're talking milliseconds here. And also provides administrators with this very user-friendly management console, which can be deployed in the cloud or on the prem to view all that relevant information. And I love it for all those reasons. But if I'm honest with you, I just want to thank Stephen for coming on here and keeping my mind focused on exciting technology for 30 minutes and not the other things that's whizzing around my head. And as for you all listening, a big warm thank you for giving me that sense of purpose to not just sit around feeling sorry for myself and forcing me to put on my game face and keep this daily tech podcast that we created together going. So a big thank you to you all. And as always, if you have any questions or any talking points about today's episode, email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com. My website is techblogwriter.co.uk. You can get me on Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, just at Neil C. Hughes. If not, if you've got nothing to say, you don't want to message me, don't worry. How about we just meet back here and do it all again tomorrow? Whew, I'm glad you said that. All right. So a big thank you for listening. And until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.